She didn't know why the thought stayed with her. It came early in the day, when everything still felt ordinary, when nothing had happened yet, when there was no reason to pause. I feel calm, and I don't know why. The thought surprised her enough to make her stop walking. The street was busy. People moved past her with purpose, faces focused on places they needed to be. Cars passed. Voices overlapped. Life continued the way it always did, and yet something inside her had slowed. She told herself it was nothing, just a quiet moment, just the air feeling lighter than usual. But the feeling didn't leave. She noticed her before she noticed anything else. Not in a dramatic way. There was no spark, no sudden pull, no moment that demanded attention. Just a presence that stood out softly, like a pause in a sentence. They were waiting in the same line, standing close enough to share space, but not close enough to touch. The kind of closeness that means nothing, until it does. She glanced sideways. The other woman wasn't looking at her. She was staring ahead, relaxed, hands resting loosely, posture unguarded. There was something about the way she stood, comfortable in her own stillness, that felt grounding. She looked away. Why am I noticing this? She wondered. Time passed without urgency. The line moved, a few steps forward. Then, another pause. When the woman finally turned her head, their eyes met. Not briefly, not accidentally, just long enough to register something unfamiliar. Calm. Her chest softened before her mind could catch up. She looked away again, this time slower. They spoke because it felt natural to do so. Nothing important, nothing revealing, just a comment about the weight. A quiet laugh that felt easy instead of forced. The conversation unfolded gently, like it wasn't trying to impress anyone. She noticed how her shoulders stayed relaxed while she spoke, how her breathing didn't change, how she didn't feel the need to edit herself. That was new. She usually noticed everything. How she stood, how she sounded, how she might be seen. But standing there, exchanging simple words with a stranger, she felt none of that pressure. She felt comfortable. They didn't rush to leave when the line ended. Instead, they lingered. Another sentence. Then, another. The day stretching open in a way neither of them had planned. She told herself this was normal. People talk. People connect. It doesn't have to mean anything. But as they walked together for a few minutes, side by side, she became aware of the space between them. Not empty. Shared. Their arms moved naturally as they walked. Close enough to feel warmth. Far enough to stay respectful. She didn't pull away. Neither did the other woman. She noticed the quiet first. Not silence, but the absence of noise inside her own head. No rehearsing. No second guessing. No restless thoughts. Just presence. And that unsettled her more than attraction ever could. Why does this feel safe? She wondered. She didn't have an answer. When they stopped near the corner, the moment arrived, the one where people usually part ways. Polite smiles, brief goodbyes, a return to routine. She expected it. She didn't feel ready for it. The other woman hesitated just slightly. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough to be felt. Their eyes met again. Something unspoken passed between them. Not desire, not intention, but recognition, as if both of them sensed the same quiet shift. "Do you have time?" the woman asked. The question was simple, casual, no pressure hidden inside it. She didn't answer right away. She listened to herself breathe. She realized she wanted to say yes, not because she was curious, but because she already felt settled. That realization stayed with her. "Sir." "Yes," she said, finally. I do, and without knowing it yet, she stepped into a day that would change the way she understood comfort and herself. They walked without direction at first, not because they were lost, but because neither of them felt the need to decide where they were going yet. The afternoon stretched ahead, unclaimed, and that felt rare. She noticed how easily her steps matched the other woman's pace. No adjusting, no effort, just alignment. They talked as they walked, about ordinary things, about places they liked, about small habits that made their days easier. Nothing heavy, nothing revealing, and yet each sentence landed softly, like it was being received with care. She laughed at something the woman said, quietly, honestly, and realized she hadn't laughed like that in a long time. Not the polite kind, not the practiced kind, the kind that leaves your chest warm afterward. They stopped at a small cafe without planning to. The decision felt mutual, even though neither of them said it out loud. Inside, the light was gentle. Afternoon sun filtered through the windows, softening everything it touched. They chose a table near the corner, close enough to feel separate from the rest of the room. She sat down and felt it immediately. Stillness. Her phone stayed in her bag. Forgotten. Unimportant. She noticed the other woman did the same. Conversation slowed, not because there was nothing to say, but because there was no rush to fill the space. They took their time with words, letting silence exist without explaining it. She found herself watching small details, the way the woman wrapped her hands around her cup, the way her shoulders lowered when she listened, the way her eyes stayed focused, not wandering. She felt, held, not physically, emotionally. At some point, she leaned back slightly in her chair, comfortable, open, unaware that she was doing it until she noticed the familiar tension was missing. She wasn't guarding herself. That realization made her pause. Since when does this feel easy? She didn't know. The cafe filled and emptied around them. People came and went. Time moved forward. They stayed. When they finally stood to leave, she felt a small resistance inside her chest, a quiet wish that the moment wouldn't end just yet. She surprised herself with it. Outside, the air had changed, heavier, cooler, the sky beginning to soften at the edges. They walked closer now, not touching but nearer than before. She became aware of the space between their arms again. How narrow it felt, how natural. At one point, the woman shifted slightly to avoid someone passing by, and her hand brushed lightly against her waist. It lasted less than a second, but her body reacted before her mind did. Her breath caught. The touch wasn't bold, it wasn't deliberate. It was gentle, careful, almost apologetic. "I'm sorry," the woman said quietly. She shook her head. "It's okay." And it was. They continued walking, but something had changed. Not tension. Awareness. She noticed how her senses sharpened, not in excitement, but in presence. The sound of footsteps, the rhythm of breathing, the warmth that lingered where the touch had been. She didn't feel unsettled. She felt grounded. They paused near a crossing, waiting for the light to change, standing side by side, close. She felt the woman's arm near hers again, close enough that moving would mean choosing distance. She didn't move. The woman didn't either. Their shoulders didn't touch, but the warmth was unmistakable. She realized she wasn't wondering what this meant. She was simply inside it. When the light changed, neither of them stepped forward right away. They looked at each other instead, not searching, not questioning, just acknowledging something unspoken. The woman smiled slightly, not wide, not playful, something quieter, something sincere. She felt it settle in her chest. Safety, not the kind that protects you from danger, but the kind that allows you to stop being on guard. As the afternoon drifted toward evening, clouds gathered slowly overhead. The air thickened. The promise of rain hung quietly in the distance. They didn't mention it. But when the woman glanced up at the sky, then back at her, something passed between them. An understanding. "Do you want to come somewhere quiet?" the woman asked. The question wasn't loaded. It wasn't urgent. It was offered. She felt no fear rise in her chest, only a calm recognition. "Yes," she said. And as they turned toward the path that would lead them indoors, she realized something important, something she had never quite understood before. Comfort didn't always arrive after trust. Sometimes it arrived first. The first drops of rain fell just as they reached the building, soft at first, almost polite. By the time they stepped inside, the sound had deepened, steady, patient, filling the space between moments. The apartment was quiet when they entered, not empty, just calm. Warm light from a single lamp softened the room. Shadows rested gently along the walls. Nothing felt staged, nothing felt prepared. It felt lived in. She stepped inside and felt her body respond before her thoughts did. Her shoulders lowered, her breathing slowed. The outside world faded as the door closed behind them. "This feels easy," she thought, and again the thought surprised her. They didn't rush to sit. She stood near the window for a moment, watching rain trace slow paths down the glass. The city beyond blurred into soft color and movement. She felt the other woman nearby, not close, not distant, present. "You can sit wherever you want," the woman said quietly. There was no instruction in her voice, no claim, just permission. She chose the couch, settling into the corner without thinking too much about it. The fabric was warm, familiar in a way that felt grounding. The woman sat a moment later, leaving space between them. Respectful, unassuming. Rain filled the silence. They talked again, briefly, about nothing important, about how quickly the weather had changed, about how the day hadn't gone the way either of them expected. She noticed how the woman listened, not waiting to respond, not interrupting, just listening. It made her feel held in a way she wasn't used to. Sa. At some point, the conversation drifted away on its own, not because there was nothing left to say, but because words suddenly felt unnecessary. She leaned back slightly, her arm resting along the back of the couch. Comfortable. Open. She realized she wasn't monitoring herself. That absence of effort felt unfamiliar. The woman shifted a little closer, not deliberately, just enough that the space between them narrowed. Their arms didn't touch, but the distance changed. She noticed the warmth first, then the awareness of breath, then the quiet understanding that neither of them felt the need to correct it. Her body responded, not with urgency but with ease. She didn't feel pulled, she felt settled. The rain grew heavier outside, drumming softly against the windows. The sound wrapped around the room, enclosing them in something private. She became aware of her senses, the quiet rhythm of breathing beside her, the gentle hum of the room, the warmth along her side. At one point, the woman reached for a glass on the table. As she leaned forward, her arm brushed lightly against her waist. This time, the touch lingered for half a second longer, not pressing, not claiming, just there. Her breath caught, but she didn't pull away. Neither did the woman. The woman started, then stopped. She turned slightly. "It's okay," she said softly, and she meant it. They stayed like that, close, still. She noticed something unexpected. There was no tension in her chest, no wondering where this was going, no fear of what it might mean, only a quiet sense of being exactly where she was supposed to be. This is what safety feels like, she realized. Not certainty, not control, but trust in the moment. She shifted slightly, adjusting her position. Their arms rested closer now, almost touching, enough to feel warmth, enough to feel choice. She chose to stay. The woman didn't move away. Time passed unnoticed. The rain softened, then returned, then softened again. Evening deepened into night without asking permission. She glanced at the clock briefly and felt surprised by how much time had passed. She didn't feel tired. She felt awake, not alert, aware. At some point, she turned her head slowly. The woman was already looking at her, not watching, not waiting, just present. Their eyes met, and this time, neither of them looked away. That look held something unfamiliar, not desire, not invitation, understanding. She felt it move through her quietly, like a truth settling into place. She didn't smile, she didn't speak, she just stayed. And in that stillness, she realized something subtle but powerful. She wasn't protecting herself anymore. She didn't feel the need to. The rain continued to fall. The room stayed warm. And without crossing a single line, something between them had already changed. Something inside her had too. Night arrived without announcement. The rain softened outside, no longer insistent, just present, like a reminder that time was still moving, even if they weren't. The room grew darker, lit only by the lamp and the faint glow from the street below. Shadows deepened, edges blurred. Everything felt slower now. She noticed how aware she had become of herself. Not self-conscious, aware of her breathing, of the way her body rested into the couch, of how natural it felt to share space without filling it. She hadn't felt this way in a long time. She had spent years believing closeness had to come with effort, with explanation, with rules. But sitting there, beside someone she had only just met, she felt none of that weight. There was no performance required, no role to play, just presence. And that realization unsettled her gently, like a truth brushing against something long ignored. She thought about how often she stayed guarded, how instinctively she kept distance even from people who meant well, not because she was afraid of others, but because she was afraid of needing. The thought stayed with her. When did I decide that safety had to be earned? She didn't remember. The woman shifted slightly beside her, adjusting her position. Their arms rested closer now, almost touching. The warmth was unmistakable. She felt it along her side, steady and calm. She didn't flinch, she didn't pull away. Her body trusted the moment before her mind could question it. She turned her head again, slowly. Their eyes met. This time, the look felt different, deeper, not searching, not curious, knowing. She felt something open quietly inside her chest. Not excitement, not longing, but recognition, as if a part of her had been waiting to feel this safe before allowing itself to surface. Her breath caught, not sharply, just enough to remind her she was alive in this moment. The woman's gaze remained steady, gentle, unafraid. She didn't ask anything of her, and somehow that was everything. Emotion rose unexpectedly, not overwhelming, just present. She swallowed, grounding herself in the feeling instead of pushing it away. This isn't about her, she realized. This is about me, about the way her body had softened, about how her guard had lowered without effort, about the quiet permission she had given herself to rest. She had always believed awakening came loudly, through passion, through choice, through dramatic moments that demanded action. But this was different. This was subtle. This was internal. This was realizing she could feel comfort without explanation, that she could sit in closeness without fear, that she didn't need to cross a line for something meaningful to exist. She simply needed to allow it. The woman blinked slowly, breaking the gaze. No disappointment, no tension, just calm continuity. She felt a strange gratitude rise in her chest, not toward the woman but toward the moment, toward herself. They stayed there for a long while, sometimes speaking softly, sometimes not speaking at all. Time stretched and folded in on itself. She noticed how often her thoughts returned to the same quiet understanding. I don't need to rush. I don't need to define this. I don't need to protect myself from it. The safety was already there. As the night deepened, she felt something settle into place inside her. A shift. Not something she could explain, not something she needed to act on. Just an inner knowing. She had crossed no boundary, and yet she was no longer the same person who had walked in earlier that evening. She leaned back slightly, eyes half closed, listening to the rain again. The woman remained beside her, present, steady, and in that quiet, shared space, she understood. Awakening doesn't always arrive through desire. Sometimes it arrives through safety, through stillness, through the simple realization that you can rest in another person's presence without losing yourself. The rain thinned into a soft whisper, barely tapping the glass now, as if it had done what it came to do and was ready to leave them alone. She was the first to become aware of time again, not because she felt rushed, but because she felt full. The kind of fullness that doesn't need more. She shifted slightly, grounding herself back into the room. The lamp cast a low, warm glow now, softer than before. Shadows stretched gently across the walls, unhurried. She looked at the woman beside her, still there, still calm, still exactly as she had been all evening. And yet, everything felt different. She understood then that nothing more needed to happen. Not tonight, not here. What had already happened was enough. That thought surprised her, but it didn't feel disappointing. It felt right. I should go, she said, quietly. The words didn't carry regret. They carried honesty. The woman nodded slowly. No protest, no pause that asked her to stay. Only understanding. That makes sense, she replied. And it did. They stood near the door, closer than before, but not touching. Close enough to feel warmth again. Close enough to notice the quiet between breaths. The moment stretched, not heavy, not charged, just present. She became aware of everything at once. The stillness of the apartment, the calm in her chest, the certainty that something important had already settled inside her. She didn't feel the urge to explain. She didn't feel the need to promise anything. She felt complete. Their eyes met one last time. There was no question in the look, no invitation, no expectation, only recognition, as if both of them understood the same truth, that some connections are not meant to be acted on immediately. They are meant to be felt, remembered. carried. She stepped into the hallway, the cool air touching her skin gently. The door closed behind her. With a soft, final sound, she stood there for a moment without moving. Her hand rested against the wall, her eyes closed. Her heart was calm. Her thoughts were clear. She realized then that the awakening hadn't been about the woman at all. It had been about herself, about learning that safety could exist without effort, that closeness didn't have to be earned through sacrifice, that comfort could arrive quietly and still change you. She smiled softly, not because she was happy, but because she was awake. Kana. As she walked away, the night felt different, not empty, not uncertain, open. And somewhere behind her, in a quiet apartment filled with fading rain, a moment remained exactly as it was, unfinished, untouched, and perfectly complete.